Hello, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. Our guest is Theodore Van Kirk, and this is what you need to know about Theodore Van Kirk. In 1945, he was 24 years old, and Captain Theodore Van Kirk. His friends called him Dutch. He was assigned to the 509th Composite Group of the U.S. Army Air Corps as a navigator on a tiny island in the Marianas. On August the 6th, 1945, he and 11 comrades boarded an aircraft called the Enola Gay and set off on a 6.5-hour journey to a target that was called Hiroshima. And when they reached that target, a few seconds after reaching that target, Dutch Van Kirk, is it fair to say the world literally did change at that moment?
I think it's fair to say that. But, a lot of people blame us for ushering in the age of atomic energy, but we didn't really. The age of atomic energy is ushered in when the atom was first split in the laboratory. And what followed was going to follow from then on.
Let's start at the beginning. You were a California lad who volunteered in the early 1940s.
I was a Pennsylvania lad.
Oh, Pennsylvania, okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You later lived in Pennsylvania.
I later lived in California.
I stand corrected.
Right.
You volunteered for the service. It was about a year before they called you up, right?
Well, yes, and but I decided I'd rather fly than walk in the mud.
Right.
Wasn't a hard choice, for heaven's sakes. And so then I tried to go and join the NEF to pilot training. I wanted to be a pilot, and as the term goes at that time, I washed out and this sort of thing. So I was going to join the RAF, and a kindly captain there told me, he says, well, you can join the RAF if you like.
Better for the benefit of our younger audience, that's the Royal Air Force, that's the British Air Force.
British Royal Air Force, correct. And he says, but you'll be dead in a year. Now, that got my attention and everything. He says, I suggest you go to navigation school instead. So I did, and I went to navigation school.
Then you went to the Pacific, and you flew.
No. Then I went to Europe.
Oh, Europe, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
And you flew the first Allied bomber mission from, or U.S. mission
the
from
U.S.
England.
mission on B-17s out of England. That was on August 17th of 1942, and I flew it with Paul Tibbets and Tom Farabee. And the three of us were together almost all during the war, and I think that's one of the things that saved me. Paul was an outstanding pilot.
You guys were a band of brothers,
so to speak. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Was it common? I don't know whether to call you Dutch or Mr. Van Kirk.
Call
or
me
Major
Dutch, please. Call me Dutch, please.
I'll call you Dutch. Okay. Was it common for crews to be allowed to stay together like that? Was that deliberate, or was it just like a draw?
In the early part of the war, it was quite common for the people in a group to stay together and everything. And later on, they got a lot of more there and everything. They'd switch them off, grab a navigator if they needed one, or grab a pilot or a bombardier or whatever if they needed one. But at that time, we stayed together, and we had a few interesting things over there in Europe and everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
All right.
We took Mark Clark down to North Africa to parley with the French, so that they would not oppose our landings in North Africa when we invaded there. Gave them $1 million or so in gold also. French haven't changed a bit. But then we took General Eisenhower down and his staff when it came time for them to go down and take command of the North African invasion. We flew him down there on that particular job. And I always remember that but the day after we got there, they told us, go up in the rock at a certain time at night, and about midnight, our invasion fleet's going to steam through the Straits of Gibraltar. What a stirring sight. What a stirring sight. And the fleet steamed through. They were small by comparison with what we later had at Normandy and places like that. But to see that, to me at the time, tremendous fleet steaming through the rocks of Gibraltar on a nice moonlight night, and knowing that nobody was going to stop them. Nobody. And this sort of thing was really a stirring sight for me to see.
You guys sort of bonded, I'm gathering now, crossing that channel on all those missions.
Oh, we had to. Absolutely. Yes. And every crew did. If the crew was worth a grain of salt, why did they all bonded? You had.
What'd you talk about, Dutch, on those flights?
On those flights? Hey, we didn't talk about anything. We talked about the navigator was always the busiest guy in an airplane. That's all I'm going to say. Tom Fairby's in a bombardier. He used to sleep until he could get to the target and everything of that type. But the navigator always had to know where they were and where they were going to go next and everything of that type. And so you were always busy. And while you're going over the channel, there's a little chit-chat here and there, like the bomber is saying, can I test fire my guns now and this sort of thing, or maybe it'd say, somebody would say, oh, my guns are starting to freeze up, let me take the thing apart and open it up and this sort of thing. And then once you got over the channel and you started going into enemy occupied territory, hey, you were on the lookout for airplanes all the time. You didn't want them to jump you without seeing them and everything of that type. So the chit-chat then was, 9 o'clock.
Back to business.
And everything of that, all very much back to business. And then when you get into the flak fields and that sort of thing, why, it was just, one of these guys going to stop shooting at us, for heaven's sakes. They said the flak was coming up very thick and heavy. And so it was just the routine chit-chat that was almost all connected with getting the plane over the target, getting the bombs on the target.
Either mechanical trouble or from anti-aircraft fire, flak. Close calls? You?
Oh yeah, a number of times. Yeah, I've been sitting with that bottom hatch on the B-17 open with my feet hanging out a number of times, waiting to jump, and this type of thing. But I always said, as long as that airplane is flying, I'm going to stay with it. I didn't want to jump unless I had to, and that's where Paul Tibbets comes in. After all my missions with Paul, and he really was a great pilot. And I can remember one mission that we got. They used to attack head on at that particular point. They come in at us like this, and then roll as they were coming in, and then break away down to show their armored underside to us with their guns. But I almost have to say, I'll stick a little jocular point here. Tom Fairby and I were the two lousiest gunners you ever saw in the nose of a B-17. We fired more ammunition at enemy airplanes without hitting a damn thing. And I think we're in the Guinness Book of World Records for that.
Well, by one standard, though, you succeeded. You're sitting here today, 60-some-odd years later.
Well, that's because the Germans were lousy shots. I think more than my defensive skills, I'll tell you that right now.
Let's go to the Pacific now, if we may. You went back stateside after Europe.
Well, yeah, and just one more things about Europe.
No, please.
We had 6 airplanes down there from taking Eisenhower down. So we decided we ought to do some good. And we went into a British field marshal there who was commanding the area around Algiers and said, we need some bombs, we need gas. So the guy gave us a bomb truck, and we had to carry our own gas and our own bombs from the docks out to our ships, load them ourselves, and then fly the mission. Have you ever refueled a B-17 out of 5-gallon cans?
I must say I have not.
Well, not many people have, but I have. I helped, let's put it that way.
Not a snap job, I guess.
No,
it takes one.
You open a lot of 5-gallon cans to refuel that baby. And then we fly the mission. And the interesting thing about that, we went back to the field marshal again and said, well, I have no maps of the area. What do you want me to bomb? And this sort of thing. He says, I think we can find you some maps. So he went out and he got a standard oil road map. And he brought it back and gave it to me, and that's what I used to navigate the first mission in North Africa.
Pacific.
Okay.
You came back stateside for a while.
I came back stateside and was at a navigation school over here at Monroe, Louisiana.
Right. And did some training, additional training, a lot of additional training, if I read correctly. Mm-hmm. And then back to the Pacific. Did you know when you left for the Pacific, you and your comrades, that this may be a special tour?
Oh, yes, we did, because when Paul Tibbets called me to see if I joined up, and we still argue about this, by the way. he always claims, well, you volunteered for this job. And I say, yes, Paul, but when I finally got my orders, they were dated 2 days before your telephone call. So much of the volunteering. But we didn't know what it was going to be, but Paul told me, excuse me, and probably told the others also. He said, what we are going to do will either A, significantly shorten the war or end the war. And he said, well, that's what we're going to be involved in.
At that point, had you gents heard about what was going on at Los Alamos or Manhattan Project?
No, we had not. I didn't know a thing about it at that time. All I knew was what I had read in Popular Mechanics or something like that. It wasn't until later when I got out to Wendover, Utah, and this was in the early parts of 1945, when if you had any brains and you were at Wendover, Utah during that period, and you did not guess that it was an atomic bomb, there's something wrong with you, because you saw a lot of atomic physicists running around and everything of that type. They were telling you were going to go out and do something that's going to destroy an entire city and possibly end the war. And if you could not put 3 and 3 together and come up with the fact that it was an atomic bomb, why, you're pretty stupid.
You added 3 and 3 and you got 6. Was it possible to sense then what was meant by atomic bomb, or what was going to happen? I mean, it was able to comprehend exactly.
No, I don't think it was. We were talking earlier here, and I said the biggest thing I'd ever dropped before is a 2,000-pound bomb. Well, 2,000-pound bomb makes a big old hole in the ground and everything of that type, but it was hard to visualize what was going to happen when the atomic bomb was dropped and they said it will destroy most of a city. Your visualization didn't jump that far, in my opinion.
Now, when you dropped a 2,000-pound bomb, and let's assume that it hit a target, say a factory, what would one 2,000 bomb be capable of doing? What kind of damage would it do?
Well, depending on where you dropped it a lot. If you dropped them on the sub-pens along the East Coast there, they'd bounce off. That's number one. And we used to drop a lot that bounced off too, I might add. But if it dropped in a place that they just had a light roof over it or something like that, why, it would go down maybe the first floor and then explode there. And you'd have a place maybe as wide as this room.
This is not a big room.
No, it's not a big room.
This is maybe 40 feet.
Yeah. But it would put a pretty good sized hole there. And if you were another 10 foot away,
right,
why, and something if it was flying or from the blast effect or something would hit you, why, it would kill you, obviously.
So we lose track, we civilians, we lose track, or don't think that the massive damage we saw in conventional bombing in the war, particularly in Europe, that's the result of scores of, for example, 2,000-pound bombs, not one.
Nope. And our accuracy over there was dismal. It really was. The funny part of it is they've tracked how far the average bomb in Europe missed the target. And don't hold me to these exactly, but it was large, over 500 feet, I know. Then they did the same thing in Vietnam and this sort of thing. And now they do it again, doing it in Iraq. Paul Tibbets' grandson is now the commanding officer of the 393rd Bomb Squadron which his grandfather founded, after hit by Whiteman, Missouri. And Paul Tibbets will say, I can sit up there and put my bombs within 10 feet of where I want to put them. And they never know I'm there.
Let's go to the Pacific. Let's go to the Marianas.
Okay.
It was, you knew something big was happening, you and your colleagues. I believe it was a couple of hours after, but about 2 a.m. when you got to wake up. Although I think I read where you didn't get much sleep that night. You knew something big was up.
Well, we were briefed early in the day, and then they told us to go get some sleep. We would be wakened at a certain time for the final briefing and everything of that type. I never did figure out how they expected to tell you you're going to go out and drop the first atomic bomb. which we didn't know we were going to get away from, and this sort of thing, and then tell you to go get some sleep. I know Paul didn't sleep, Tom didn't sleep, and I didn't sleep because we were in the same poker game. And I don't even know who won in that game or anything like that. If 2-4, Tom Fairview won, but that's all right. And then they came about 10 o'clock and woke us up. We were already awake. And to go over for the final breakfast and the final briefing as to what the winds were, the final weather, where the Dumbos all were, where the air sea rescues were, and everything of that type. And the thing I remember about that, Tom Fairview used to always say to me, Dutch, you know where those Dumbos are. I don't want to get my feet wet.
Here she is. This is
Yep.
the Enola Gay. This
Yep.
is what now. This is landing after that.
That's
mission.
like coming back from Hiroshima. Yes, sir.
Okay, but where is Dutch Van Kirk? You up there?
He's right in front of that wing there, right up in there. The bombardier is right up here in the nose. The pilot is right here on the upper raise, sitting up raised, a little bit behind him. Then I'm sitting right behind the bombardier, the pilot.
You guys needed all the fuel you could have, so essentially.
Well, not really. We were very heavily overloaded, not because we needed the fuel, but because we had the bomb in the front bomb bays. We had to carry fuel then in the back bomb bays to get our weight balance right.
Matter of balance then rather than
matter of
distance
balance
or
on the plane,
range.
yes.
Okay.
So we had plenty of fuel and had to Hiroshima and everything like that. Nagasaki's where they screwed up.
Little Boy, it was named Little Boy, although it weighed 4.5 tons.
And Little Boy, I'll tell you, Little Boy was the only uranium bomb ever dropped. We used all of the uranium ever extracted at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in our one bomb.
Before, let's assume this is takeoff here, rather than landing. Where would the bomb have been? Which you had two bomb bays, right, on a B-29?
Yep. Well, this bomb bay would have been right between the wheels there.
Okay, so
Yes.
right about there.
Right in there,
in the
right.
midsection
Yep.
of the aircraft
Yep.
or the lower middle
Yep.
section. That's where it
And then the second bomb bay would be right behind it.
Anybody, you told me prior to the taping here that anybody who wished to, and I guess that was everybody, could go near the bomb bay and look at this thing.
Yeah, there's a sight glass in the front of the bomb bay, and about 10 inches diameter, maybe 8 inches, something of that type. And you could look in there and you could see the bomb sitting back there.
What did you think? What did you say? Did it look like a... Obviously it was
Well,
bigger,
I'll
but...
tell you, I knew that Captain Parsons was going to arm the bomb in flight. And that required his handling black powder back in the bomb bay in order to arm the bomb in flight. I was much more worried about him handling black powder out there back there than I was the atomic bomb and this type of thing.
All right. Was there a lot of... Was there a certain sense aboard the plane? I mean, this is... You'd been told this is not another bomb. You knew that.
Yep.
What was the mood aboard the plane? Was there a mood other than...
Well, the mood was that, hey, there had been a tremendous amount of money spent on this, development of this bomb. It was our big chance to end the war and save many lives in the process. Without an invasion, without Japanese killing more people in China and everything of that type. This was our big opportunity to do that. Don't screw it up. I was very apprehensive. I didn't want to be the guy to screw it up. I want to make sure I found the right target right on time and everything of that type.
When you were approaching the target, you feel your respiration go up, your heart rate go up? I mean, were you tense?
No, I don't think so. By that time, this is the critical part of the mission. And, if anything, and for me personally, I think when you reach that critical part of the mission, I slow down.
Oh.
And everything else. I try to say now, is this all right? Don't do anything now to screw it up and things of that type. And you slow down whether you want to or not. It's almost automatic.
When you guys took off, I think you were even told, we're not all together. We can't be 100% certain that you guys are going to come back.
That is correct.
I mean, that's on any obviously any combat mission. But Given the nature of the armament, there was no guarantee that the aircraft itself, after the explosion, could survive.
We were told by the scientists very early on that we would have to be 9 miles away from the bomb when it exploded, or it might take the airplane with it. So we were working very hard to be at least 9 miles away when the bomb exploded.
All right. The bombardier does whatever a bombardier does, whether it's push a button, pull a lever.
Well, he doesn't really. He has a bomb sight there, and a bomb sight's just one of the early computers. And he has 2 indices. He sets in one, and then the other indice moves, and when they cross, it automatically goes. But Tom Fairby used to say, I never trust those things, so he pushed the salvo button anyhow.
The bomb has been released. Take us from that point forward.
Okay, now we knew that when the bomb was released from the airplane, it would take about 43 seconds for it to fall to the altitude at which it exploded.
By the way, what's your altitude there, Captain?
We're at just a little over 30,000 feet.
Okay.
30,600, something of that type, and which is as high as we could get, by the way. And we knew it would take 43 seconds, so immediately the plane surged when the bomb left the plane. We knew we'd have to make a 150-degree turn to get maximum distance between us and the bomb. A pilot always, air people always fly with their hands. You have to understand this. But you knew we'd have to make a 150-degree turn, so Paul put it in the 150-degree turn, lost 2,000 feet in the turn in order to build up airspeed. Paul used to always say, unless your tail is stalling, you don't have that turn tight enough. So it was a shuddering when while you're doing that. Made the 150-degree turn, you started away from it. By that time, the tail is toward the target now. And everybody's sitting there counting. I'm counting, looking at my watch, counting it and everything of that type. And after 43 seconds, we got it seemed longer than that, but anyhow, 43 seconds is a bright flash in the airplane. Very similar to a photographer's bulb going off in a dark closet. And then we continued away, and somebody hollered flak. Felt like a very close burst of flak under the right wing or something like that. Tail gunner says it wasn't flak, it was a shock wave, and here comes another one. So then we got the reflected shock wave, not quite as big. First shock wave was measured about 3 to 3.5 Gs. Which doesn't sound like much to a fighter pilot, but in a B-29 at 30,000 feet, why, it was a pretty good jolt. Then the second one was not as strong, so then we weren't sure we weren't going to get any more shock waves from it, so we made a left-hand turn to turn around so we could see out the window and see what had happened to Hiroshima. We could make no visual observation whatsoever. The entire city of Hiroshima was covered with thick black smoke and dust and dirt and everything that had been kicked up by the blast. And around the periphery of the city, you could see some fires breaking out. By this time, the large white mushroom-shaped cloud that you've all seen pictures of was forming and was up above our altitude already, up above 30,000, I'm sorry. And everyone wants to know what color. Well, on top it was white, and the stem of it was all colors of the rainbow, purples, reds, and everything of that type. Just about every color of the rainbow you want to see in there. And then we flew a little bit in the southeast quadrant of the city, trying to make visual observation. We can make none. It's just impossible to see any of the city, so we decided we'd turn around and go home.
And Dutch Van Kirk is thinking what?
Well, at that time, my major thought was, my land, what happened to all those people on the ground? And, something always goes through your mind and everything of that type. But it was a necessary act of war, unfortunately. And also, the second thought went through my mind, this war is over.
You knew?
I was pretty doggone confident. The only thing I was not confident of, I didn't think the Japanese would even fool around for the second bomb or something of that type. But their warlords and everything thought, based on their atomic program, see, they had an atomic program too. Everybody had an atomic program. Based on their atomic program and the fact that we had dropped the uranium bomb and they were working with uranium, They thought, they only have one bomb. They didn't know we had already developed bombs using plutonium. And all subsequent bombs were plutonium-type bombs. And so we get back, and there was no indication from the Japanese that they were accepting our terms of unconditional surrender. We sent airplanes back to drop more leaflets over Japan. We dropped many, many, hundreds of thousands of leaflets over Japan before we ever dropped the first bomb. And more hundreds of thousands of leaflets over Japan before we ever dropped the second bomb.
What was the mood aboard the plane? I mean, you had seen a city consumed in smoke. Well, it was just covered in smoke and debris, and that massive.
The mood on the plane and everything was a major one. Was what I said the second time. My second reaction: this war is over, and everything at that time. Could you feel the tug of history at that moment, or the sense that, oh boy, we have opened a door, mankind has opened a door? We just want to get back to our base and get the free beer.
Yeah.
No, at that particular point, I don't think we had any sense of history or anything of that type. I'd been there for 5 years, and 4 years really, and I was getting tired of this war and everything of that type, and we were just want to get the war over with and get home.
And now, you've had 60 some odd years to contemplate or reflect on.
Well, right now I look back and I say, everything being exactly the same as it was at that particular time, I would do it again, and everything like that. You had to remember there were about 10,000 people being killed over there every week. It wasn't so much Americans, because unless we were involved in an invasion or something like that, our losses were not all that heavy. Yeah, we lost maybe 10 crews a week or something of that type. If an engine had pulled full power when it's going down the runway, and they'd crash at the end of the runway and everything. But that's relatively insignificant. But the big slaughter was coming apart over in China and in Indonesia and everything of that type. And I had the Chinese people today come up and thank me profusely for dropping the bomb, because the people were being killed there, willy-nilly practically. And so basically it was all those people that were going to be killed if the bomb had not been dropped. The other thing about it is, I don't know when the war would have ended if we hadn't dropped the bomb. It would not have been August 14th, I'll tell you that right now. I suspect it might have been another month, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever.
You're one of the rare people alive today who have seen what a nuclear weapon can do. Any thoughts now on the nature of not only thermonuclear war, but on war itself? I mean, you've tasted it, you've seen it, you've watched comrades die.
Hey, I have often said I thought that the people who had seen nuclear weapons explode, or even had reports of them among our leaders and the Russian leaders and everything of that type, they're not the people we have to worry about exploding another nuclear weapon. Yeah, they might do it in retaliation, but they're not going to start anything with it. And I think, we haven't had a bomb explode now for 62 years, something of that type, anything of that type. My concerns right now are what happens among the terrorist-type countries. Bombs are easy to make. Quite if you had the material. Well, I can recommend a good book that'll tell you how to make one.
Well, they don't weigh tons anymore, right?
No, they're peanuts and this sort of thing. And I have great concerns about what would happen if the terrorist nations get their hands on them.
This is a book, The 509th Remembered.
Yes.
I'm going to take just a moment and commend it to the attention of the audience, because it's absolutely fascinating reading. There's more history in that than...
Well, that particular book was written by the people in the 509th. Years later, we all wrote what we remembered about the 509th and what was good about it and what was bad about it, from the cold weather at Wendover, Utah, and the burning your pants on the little stoves they had there and everything of that type, to all the good things about it. The best account of the Hiroshima mission, I think, is in that book, for example. And Bob Krause and his wife Amelia collected those writings for many years so that they could put together a little booklet that we'd use at our reunions and everything of this type. And finally they came to the realization that they had the best collection of writings about the droppings of the bombs in the 509th Group and everything that anybody had. So they worked a couple of years at least, putting it all together in that book. And it's a big book. It's hard to hold, and you don't try to hold it in bed at night to read it and that sort of thing. But
well, a lot of photographs, a lot of memories, a lot of documents, a lot of...
Well, there's about every photograph that Bob has is in that book also. It's about 1,000 photographs in that book of all the planes, all the people, and everything of that type. I refer to it quite often. I really do.
You are a part of, it's into the vernacular now, the greatest generation. Yours is...
baloney.
Oh, come on.
Hey, we did it because we had to. That's number one. And hey, when they gave me a B-17 to fly around, I thought it was great. It took a place of my Tin Lizzie and that sort of thing. And I thought, gee, here I am. I got an airplane I can fly around in. And and I think everybody in the war did their best not to let their buddies down. I think if there's any one driving force in the war, it was, I will not let my buddies down. If you're in an airplane, if you're in an infantry division, or anything of that type, I got to take care of my buddies. And if they can do it, goddamn, I can do it too. And I still think we have a lot of that spirit. Maybe not as much as we had then, but we might have if they were all had to go someplace.
The political climate is a little different, though, isn't it?
Oh,
it's changed significantly.
Exactly. Far different. Far different. Yes. And I never will understand that. I don't understand politicians, period.
Well, and I'm not saying that there was not my readings. I was a bit young, but my readings are there was some dissent at home, stateside dissent at home.
Not much.
Not much.
Not much.
Certainly not compared to the last two major engagements that the U.S. has found itself in. Did that make a significant difference to you guys at the front? Or did you give much thought to it?
I don't think we gave much thought to it because our communications was not near as good as it is now. Hey, these fellows in Iraq, they pick up their cell phones, they call mama at home, and this sort of stuff. When we left to go overseas, we knew we were going to be there until the duration.
Cessation of hostilities, I think was the formal term.
Yeah. And so was your mindset was different and this sort of thing. Now we want to fight a war and have all the comforts of home. And hey, I admire these guys, and why shouldn't they have the comforts of home? But it does give you a different viewpoint. I'll say that.
Went from free beer to cell phones on the battlefield. I mean, just on average, how long, you got mail in the Marianas.
Yes.
Mail call. How long did it take for, I know it may depend on where, Little Rock, California, New York, where did the mail start? But a sweetheart writing her fella, or maybe a guy writing his whack overseas. How long would it take to say a first-class letter to reach you?
It depended. Depends entirely on how fast the ships came, whether they put it on an airplane or they put it on a ship. I'll give you a little example. My son, my first son, was born the day I left to go to Tinian. And I think Paul Tibbets is trying to drag his feet so that my son would be born before I had to leave.
Was he?
Oh, he was, yes.
Okay, but, so you got a glimpse of that.
Oh, yeah. But then it didn't come off. So my son was born almost at the time I left San Francisco. And my wife thought that the fastest way to tell me about my new son would be to tell the Red Cross. Well, I'm over on Tin Hand 3 weeks later getting letters from my wife saying, the baby did this, the baby did... I didn't even know whether I had a son or a daughter or what. But the baby was doing whatever my wife would say it was doing anyhow.
21 days. About the lag
least.
time.
Yep. Many, many times.
Yeah. I've heard any number.
And they come in batches, too.
Yeah.
You might get 10 letters at a time.
So many veterans of the Second World War and of Korea and even Vietnam say that mail, there weren't cell phones until recently, or laptop where you could email one another from the battlefield. That was a morale booster. That was important.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. You
keep the contact alive.
Well, you wanted to know what was happening back. I come from a small town in Pennsylvania. Had a population of 5,000 then. It has a population of 5,000 now. And it's not growing very rapidly. But in any event, you wanted to know what was going on. You wanted to know what your buddies were doing, what your parents were doing, what your other relatives were doing, and everything of that type. And to get that information was very important to a person. And then you get other information that wasn't. I remember I was stationed in Biskra, North Africa at the time, the home of the dates. So I got a Christmas package full of dates.
And the news from home wasn't always good.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes a lot of men got very bad letters in that respect.
Sure. The spirit of service and of sacrifice, do you sense it abroad in the land now? We have a volunteer military now. National service is not compulsory.
It is abroad in the land among a certain class of people. The military are very gung-ho and this sort of thing. And I cannot tell you how much I admire Paul Tibbets IV, P4, for his service to the country. And, he went to the Air Force Academy, and now he's a full colonel and everything of that type. Then there's another class of people that I don't even know why they're still living, if you tell the truth. That seems very harsh, but they have no interest in anything, this sort of thing. And by the way, there's another factor in here too. Our population today is about twice what it was then, and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of that second group comes from our population increase and everything of that type. But I still think that there are a large majority of people, if they were forced to go into the service and do some good for their country, would respond very positively.
You enlisted, but you also knew you were going one way or the other.
Yeah, I'd have been there soon.
Sure, yeah. Should we have an all-volunteer? I mean, did we lose something when we abolished conscription, the draft?
I've never been in favor of military conscription, but I often did think that everybody, from the time they get out of high school, owed their country something. And they should be doing something for the good of their country. Now, unfortunately, the way we are today, the program would probably cost about $500 billion or something of that type, so it'd be very difficult to carry out. But I've always felt that it'd be good to have the Swiss system of everybody serving their country in some way.
She's the Enola Gay. Do you see her often?
I go up and see her up at the Smithsonian Museum at least twice a year. Yes, sir. I got a good rapport with those people up there. 1995, we went through a big flap with the Smithsonian about what kind of display was going to be had, and they canceled it, and I think rightly so. But now they have it right.
Now, her survival was not always assured. I mean, she could have.
Well, they took it out of the chop 'em up fleet down at Phoenix and flew it up to Chicago. Paul and Tom did that. Then it went to the Smithsonian, and they parked it out at Andrews Field. And they just let it sit out there in the open in Andrews Field for a long time. And people took parts off of it. And then when they come in and say, oh, I'd like to have that little airspeed meter off the Enola Gay. So they got a screwdriver and took it off, and this sort of thing. And then they got a regime in there about 95 and everything. Martin Harwood was a director of Air and Space at the time, and I remember Martin telling me one time, well, Dutchie said, we're going to do a 100-year restoration on this Enola Gay. And I looked at him with all innocence and said, Martin, does that mean you're going to take 100 years to finish it?
It's the pilot's prerogative, am I correct, to name the aircraft?
Usually they consult the crew. Usually they do. But when all comes down to the end, hey, would you have wanted to stick something on this airplane like the Naked Virgin?
Well, I don't have an no.
I don't think so.
No.
And if we had left it up to some of the other people on the crew, that's what would have been on it.
Yeah.
And I think that Paul Tibbets suggested his mother's name, Enola Gay, and Tom and I knew his mother very well, and we thought that was a fine choice.
Yeah. Other than that, it's bare of nose art, right? Which was
yeah, they're up in the front on this side. They have the list now of all the people that flew on it, and Bombardier, Tom Fairby, Navigator, Dutch Van Kirk, so on and so forth. But other than that, it's bare.
Yeah. This was what was it like aboard that plane? Was it? Could you even pretend to be comfortable on?
Oh, yes.
Really?
Hey, compared to a B-17, that was a comfortable airplane. B-17, you got onto the airplane, you got to 10,000 feet, you put an oxygen mask on, and you wore it until you get back. I even learned to smoke under an oxygen mask.
Well, that was a bit...
That was a bit much, wasn't it?
Well, it was a bit dangerous, was it?
Yes,
a little
it
bit?
But anyhow, this plane here was a first pressurized airplane. And now if you took off during the day, boy, it was very hot in there. It was just like a big hothouse in there. You could get on and take off all your clothes down to your shorts and then put them back on as you gained altitude.
Was that in fact done? I mean, was it sometimes? I mean,
many times.
Got rid of, yeah.
Many times. And this one here, we took off at 2:45, so it was cool and everything of that type. So we didn't have any problem, but we had all the, and most of the airplanes had turrets in them. Right, where, sitting right alongside of where I was sitting would have been a big turret. So you didn't have the luxury of room and everything, but we didn't have any turrets. So we had lots of room in the plane.
Right, gun turrets.
Yes.
Now, obviously we can see the tail gunner here. Captain, where else would the plane be armed? Where would we see armaments on?
That's it. That's the only one. That airplane had only one gun, two guns on it. That was a tail.
That's it.
Yeah.
So essentially you relied on, what, fighters?
Altitude,
Escorts?
speed, and the fact that, let's put it this way, that atom bombs did not win World War II. Japan was a defeated nation before we ever dropped the atomic bombs. 85% of the industrial capacity of Japan was burned down before we ever dropped the atomic bombs. And I don't know why they were still fighting. I guess if I had to make a judgment, I'd just say it was plain stupidity. But they continued to want to fight and carry on and fight the last big battle on the beaches when we invaded to get better terms for surrender.
Post-surrender or surrender, because surrender they got a piece of paper.
That's
and
right.
The emperor.
Yeah. Well, post-surrender, yes. That's what I'm talking about, with the emperor and everything, yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. What did you eat? Do you have rations?
Sandwiches. Yeah.
Coffee.
We had an extremely good mess hall. Charlie Perry he was a fine cook. Somebody had the presence of mind to send tractors and stuff like that over there, and they farmed the island. And Charlie, I don't know how he did it, but he always got his share of fresh food. Well, he had been I believe this is the case. I think he had been managing a Stadler or Hilton hotel someplace, so he knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. So we always had outstanding mess hall, and And then Charlie would give us a bunch of sandwiches and stuff to carry along and everything. And then we'd roll oranges down the length of that plane, down the tunnel. You know, there's a tunnel that goes through right above the bomb bays. If you want to go from the front of the plane to the back of the plane, you crawled through the tunnel.
Crawled?
Crawled. Yeah, I could not get through there anymore. I'm a little bit too big for it now. But we used to, you know, we know a guy was sleeping in the back end of the plane right at the end of the tunnel. We'd roll some oranges down there and hit him on the head or something like that.
So Mrs. Ronald Reagan wasn't the first to do the orange down the aisle
No,
trick.
that's right. Right.
Okay, but it is not a catwalk, it was a crawl. It was cramped. I mean, space was at a premium on this.
Well, see, you had two bomb bays. You had a bomb bay forward and a bomb bay aft, and then you just over it, you had a tunnel like, I don't know, maybe like that, something like that. And
Right.
you get in there on your knees and your elbows, and you wanted to get from the front of the plane to the back or the back to the front, you crawled. It was a little bit padded, but that's about the only thing. Only piece of luxury we had.
Really? And this was a step up from the aircraft that you...
Oh, except the B-17. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a good airplane. At that particular time, it was state-of-the-art airplane. We had fuel injection engines on it. We had reversible pitch props. We had snap-open bomb bay doors. Yeah, it was state-of-the-art airplane.
Are there men that you would remember now, right here, as we're talking? Are there men you remember that weren't able, that did not come home?
Oh, yes, many.
Talk to us about them.
Many. Well, I just had a little incident several weeks ago where I was reading one of these veterans magazines, and some person in there was hunting information about a navigator named Ted Hogenstadt. Now, Ted Hogenstadt happened to be a personal friend of mine, and I could have told him, I did call them and tell him what happened to Ted. And we were making a bomb bread on Brazerte, and he took a burst of flak in the bomb bay, and poof, nothing. That's just it. We had a fine young waist gunner in our B-17s. Most of these things go to B-17s because that's where I got the action,
right,
and everything at that time. The 509th never lost a man, never injured a man. In the 509th group, about 1,700 people in that group, nobody was ever injured, nobody was ever lost.
The heartache in your case was in Europe.
In Europe, absolutely, yep. But Bob Calder, Ted Cochran, people of that type, yeah. You stop to think about them every once in a while. And every once in a while then you get a little letter or something like that from somebody you haven't heard from a long time. And I had one from Gene Anschbacher up here in Wichita. And, there's an airplane, a B-29, they're trying to get refurbished to fly now, named Doc. And a bunch of people from Doc were up at Oshkosh, and I talked to them, and I says, "Do you know a fellow named Anschbacher?" I said, "Well, sure, I know a fellow named Anschbacher." So then I get home very shortly thereafter, and Anschbacher sent me a letter. That's a delight. It really is a delight to hear people. Hey, at my age, we're mostly gone, and this sort of thing. So it is really, and to see them go, it's the tough part. Tom Farabee, best friend I ever had. And we met in the nose of a B-17 in Sarasota, Florida.
In the nose.
Nose. And, well, he was a bombardier and I was a navigator. And I always remember that first flight because we're up there, we're getting ready to take off, and the pilot gets in the plane and this sort of stuff. He's going to get the plane started. Some old sergeant comes wearing up through the airplane. He says, "For Christ's sakes, Lieutenant, if you can't start it, you can't fly it." But anyhow, Tom later, we were at Charlotte, North Carolina, and I told him, I could tell he was sick. And I said, "You go to the doctor when you get home." And he did, and he had pancreatic cancer. He said the doctor's given him 6 months to live. That's tough. But from then on, I called Tom every day the rest of his life. And at one point he said to me, he says, "Dutch, He said, I'm going to die from this someday soon. And he says, when I do, will you say some nice things about me at my funeral? Now, what do you say to a guy that's after he asks you that? So I thought a minute, and I said, Tom, I will if I can think of any.
I'll bet you can.
I could think of millions. But then the subsequent days, I would think of all the things he wouldn't want me to say. And then I'd say, Tom, how about if I tell him about that Arab girl you used to chase around in a hotel over there in Casablanca? Oh, my God, don't tell him that. After a while, he comes back and he says, you know, I'm not sure you're the right guy for this job.
Is it instinct to remember the over-the-top times, the happy times?
Oh, I think so. Oh,
a shield?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
You guys would come back, I guess, in waves or in something akin to waves from missions over the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And you maybe knew at the time, or maybe you knew after landing, that some of those brothers didn't come back. Was there time to grieve then, time to mourn, or were you just so concentrated on survival?
No. You never got time. You're always planning the next day's mission. And for one thing, I will always admire the people in the 8th Air Force for. The 8th Air Force had the highest rate of casualties of any unit in any service in the United States services. The 8th Air Force's casualty rate was higher than a bunch. And the 8th Air Force guys never refused to go. Never. Guy might come back and he might say, I'm not going to any more damn missions. I've had it. I'm not going again. Never any forcing, never anything of that type. They just let the guy go and this sort of thing. And he'd be around there, and he knew he'd had to get his number of missions in before he could come home.
Right.
So then he'd say, well, all right, I'm going to go again, and this sort of thing. So he'd go on another mission, and he'd come back and say, I'm never going to fly another damn mission, and this sort of thing. And he went through that.
And in the first days of the 8th, they bore the brunt of the off. There was still a great deal of defensive capabilities on the part of
Yep.
surface to air, and also opposing defensive aircraft.
Especially defensive aircraft, yes.
Let me go back again to the notion of service, if I can. Was there a feeling that we are fighting for our homeland over there? I mean, the sense that, we have to do this. Is not an optional engagement, that there is a direct and real threat to our way of life, our home.
Oh, I don't think there was during World War II. We knew that we were pretty insulated and that we were safe and everything of that type. But following along on that, though, I do believe that the Japanese did us a tremendous service when they bombed Pearl Harbor the way they did. And, I can introduce you to Marines who, at 16 years of age, went out and enlisted that day. Were kicked out a few days later and everything. This is really a funny thing. This guy down here in Mississippi, Jack Lucas is his name. And then he's standing there. He has all his gear and everything of that type, and somebody's calling out names to go aboard this ship for the Marines. And this guy calls a name, and the guy doesn't answer. So Jack says, oh, yeah, that's me. And he goes on and gets on the back end of the Marines that way. Then he throws himself on 2 grenades. And he's still living. And everything of that type.
Does he know a special prayer, or has he got a special angel?
Well, I have no idea why he's still living. But he's happily married, enjoys life tremendously, and everything of that type. And he's just fun to be around. I don't know whether I want to live with him day to day, but he's fun to be around for a while.
Dutch Van Kirk, thank you so much for your service, and thank you so much for this hour.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.